Winter in Russia can be brutal, right? But the winter of 2025 hit different. It didn't just bring snow and ice, it brought chaos. Just look at the skies over Moscow. Flight tracking sites show over 100 cancellations at the airports, leaving thousands of folks stuck. At Vnukovo Airport, crews are working hard to clear the runways, but it's just not enough. Why's that? Because Russia is facing a winter that feels anything but natural. Russia is facing a wild situation right now, with Ukraine's drone strikes and freezing Siberian weather hitting hard. Snow is piling up, blocking roads, while those kamikaze drones are taking out energy facilities one by one. Putin thought he could count on General Winter to save him, but this time, that cold front is aimed right at the Kremlin. He's thrown the entire budget and all of Russia's resources into the war in Ukraine, and it's not looking good. Snowplow fuel's been redirected to tanks, infrastructure budgets shifted to missiles, and repair crews sent to the front lines. The result? From Moscow's fancy streets to Yakutia's icy villages, everyone's feeling the pinch. Planes can't take off in the capital, boiler rooms are quiet in Siberia, and factories are closed in the Ural Mountains. As attacks hit power plants, the brutal Russian winter creeps in through the cracks, leaving the people to freeze while Putin stays fixated on his agenda. Victory. Today on MrWARLOG, we will discuss that great collapse left defenseless by Putin's warlust, crushed under drones and ice. Russia's infrastructure is a tired legacy from the Soviet Union, and that legacy raised the white flag in the winter of 2025. The same scene is everywhere from the Moscow suburbs to the Urals. Hot water gushing like geysers from under the roads, streets turning to ice in minutes, and buildings cracking from the cold. Why aren't they being repaired? Because the plumbers, welders, and engineers who could fix those pipes are currently dying in the trenches of Ukraine. The billions of rubles needed to renovate the infrastructure were spent on hypersonic missile production. While Putin threatens that Europe will freeze, he watches the collapse of central heating systems in his own cities. The war has swallowed not only soldiers, but also municipal services. The Russian people are living in medieval conditions in modern cities and apartment buildings. When the central system collapses, they overload electric heaters. This time the transformers explode. Russia is experiencing a domino effect within itself. But at least in the cities, there is a sound, smoke, chaos. But what about those distant lands where even sound freezes, abandoned to the fate of the state? That's where the real tragedy begins. Now, let's go to the very edge of the map to Yakutia, Russia's largest but loneliest region in terms of area. Here, thermometers read -56°C. Regional Energy Minister Vyacheslav Ulyanov appeared before the cameras and admitted companies cannot pay. The coal is gone. Deliveries have stopped. Which regions? Aldansky, Cherubchinsky, Tatinsky. Coal reserves have been depleted in 6 huge regions. So who is responsible? The private sector? No. The largest institution in debt is the state's own enterprise, ZERS. The state company is not paying the coal mine. The mine is not supplying coal and the citizens are suffering. The state owes the state and the system is locked. Want proof? Look at the Sanger settlement in the Kabaysky region. 2 huge boiler rooms were sealed due to debts owed to the energy company Saka Energ. In the Olenyk settlement, things are even worse. A state of emergency was declared before the heating season began. Why? Because the administrators in Aldansky could only get a third of the money they were expecting from Moscow to buy coal. They had enough coal to last until November. That date has passed. What are they burning now? Their furniture or their hopes? The desperation is such that the advice given to the public by officials in the Cherubchik region sounds like a joke. Don't heat the cultural centers, sports halls, or administrative offices. Save energy. Imagine a state so powerless it cannot heat its own district administration building, its own school. The head of Yakutsk warned in the fall the winter will be long and hard. But no one predicted that at -40°C, the state would pull the plug completely. Kremlin media is running propaganda headlines about heroic Russian workers who work even at -50. But the reality is this. In the village of Tixi, schools are closed, kindergartens are frozen solid, and pipes have burst. The crisis is not limited to the cold. Gasoline has also run out in Siberia. Siberia, the homeland of oil. But the Zabakovsky governor wrote a pleading letter to Moscow. People can't find gasoline for their cars. Only police and ambulances are being given fuel. Why? Because Ukraine has brought the war to Russia's heart. Ukrainian drones are systematically striking Russian refineries. According to Reuters, Russia's refining capacity has dropped by 20%. Ukrainian President Zelensky's words echo at that empty gas station in Siberia. Russia's energy sector will pay the price of the war. Russia's budget is melting away with every bullet fired on the Ukrainian front. But the problem is not limited to the energy sector. According to a December 25th analysis by the Moscow Times, Russia's overall industrial production fell by 0.7% year-on-year in November. This is the sector's first contraction since February 2023. While manufacturing output fell by 1%, it is noteworthy that the decline came almost entirely from non-resource sectors. In other words, Russia can still extract its underground riches, but it no longer has the production capacity to process them and turn them into goods that meet the needs of its people. The situation in the civilian industrial sector is nearing collapse. Many sectors from basic food production to textiles and furniture are experiencing declines not seen in many years. The automotive sector is sliding into a sharp recession. The production of agricultural machinery and infrastructure vehicles has virtually come to a standstill. Most strikingly, products that directly affect people's daily lives are no longer being produced in sufficient quantities. The country's resources are increasingly being directed solely toward the war economy. This picture is reminiscent of the final years of the Soviet Union. At that time, factories were feeding the war effort, not daily music life. The shelves were empty. Production was for the army, not for the people. Today, Russia stands at the same crossroads, arms or prosperity. Alina Rybakova of the Peterson Institute for International Economics points out that the war economy is no longer compatible with civilian welfare. As the military-industrial complex grows, the quality of life for the people is rapidly declining. The decline in imports, coupled with inflation and the artificial strengthening of the ruble, is devastating the purchasing power of the people. While exporters suffer losses, even defense production has begun to lose momentum. Production in the manufactured metal products category, which had increased by more than 30% last year, fell by 1.6% in November. Growth in tank and armored vehicle production after a 41% jump in October remained at only 6.4%. In other words, signs of fatigue are now becoming visible even in this sector. The Russian government, meanwhile, keeps revising its growth forecast downward. The growth forecast for 2025, initially set at 2.3%, was reduced to 1% by the end of the year. International organizations are even more pessimistic. The World Bank predicts that the Russian economy will remain stagnant until 2028. German economist Janis Klug states that Russia is in its weakest economic positions since the start of the war because now there are no high commodity prices or consumer spending. But none of this means anything to that old woman in Yakutia. The World Bank's 2028 forecast is a long way off. She is just looking for ways to get through the night without freezing. So what is Putin doing? With budget problems and projects failing, Putin appears on camera and says, local officials are failing. They must involve everyone. This is classic Russian theater. Goods are bad officials. Moscow cuts funding, drains resources, spends on the war. Then, when a crisis hits, it blames the local governor. While the minister in Yakutia cries, we're out music of money, Putin shakes his finger instead of taking responsibility. Although the Russian leader does not accept responsibility for what is happening, the country's economy is on the brink of collapse. Western energy sanctions have dealt a heavy blow to oil exports, Moscow's largest source of income. According to international analysis organizations, Russia's oil revenues decreased music by 15% to 22% in 2025 alone. With increasing pressure on the shadow tanker fleet, insurance obstacles, and port blacklists, this decline is expected to deepen in 2026. Experts agree that the decline in oil profits will increase by at least 10% to 15% next year. However, the most critical point is this. The Kremlin is still budgeting based on prices in its own fantasy world. The 2026 federal budget assumes an oil barrel price of $60, but the market reality is quite different. Sanctions have pushed Russian oil well below global prices. The result of this artificial gap is a massive deficit. The budget deficit is rapidly approaching $100 billion. Music so. How is the Kremlin closing this massive gap? The answer is tragic and simple. By turning off the tap. When public spending is cut, the first targets are poor regions thousands of kilometers away from Moscow. Remote and forgotten regions like Yakutia, Tuva, Buryatia. Coal supplies for heating are being cut off. Local budgets are being suspended and payments to hospitals are being delayed. Moreover, while all this is happening, the Kremlin continues to export energy abroad. Electricity flows to Kazakhstan. Music, natural gases, pumped to China. Because for Putin's administration, the real priority is not keeping the people music warm, but protecting foreign exchange reserves. In Moscow's eyes, the value of a citizen freezing to death is far less than a few $1 million transfers into the bank. The banking sector has been hit the hardest. Music sanctions imposed on institutions, such as Gazprom Bank, have destabilized the financial market by restricting the flow of dollars. By 2026, a full-blown banking crisis seems inevitable as companies struggle to pay their debts due to high interest rates. Russia's real GDP is 12% below pre-war forecasts, and the economy risks sliding into negative growth in 2026. EU sanctions will be extended indefinitely. Without access to advanced technology, Russia's aviation and manufacturing sectors will stagnate, leading to mass layoffs and declining productivity. In 2026, Russia may face a stark choice: finance the war or feed its people. Russia's war economy is a double-edged sword. Military spending reached $160 billion in 2025. This is equivalent to approximately 7.2% of GDP, the highest level since the Soviet era. The defense industries boomed, creating job opportunities in this sector. However, this growth is not sustainable. The 2026 budget prioritizes war over civilian needs, with defense spending reaching up to 40% of total spending. This militarization is crippling healthcare, education, infrastructure, and public services. War costs exceeded $195 billion in 2025 alone, with similar. The labor shortage is really making things worse. Over 500,000 Russian workers have died, and millions have left the country. Factories are focusing on producing tanks, missiles, and warplanes, while everyday goods are getting ignored. This is causing inflation and a shrinking economy. Experts from the Carnegie Foundation are sounding the alarm about a potential stagflation crisis in 2026. Russia is facing a serious demographic issue, with its population dropping to 142 million. By January 2025, Russia's population is expected to drop to 142 million from 147 million in 2021. This decline is fueled by the emigration of around 1 million skilled workers, mainly in tech and finance, causing a serious talent drain. Birth rates are at an all-time low, with a projected decrease of 15 million by 2046. The labor shortage is set to get worse by 2026, with war deaths surpassing 500,000 and productivity taking a hit. GDP might fall by 1 to 2%, leading to stagnation and brain drain. Russia is really caught in a tough spot. Superpower but cannot produce tractors. It says it is an energy giant but cannot heat its own people. Tank factories are working overtime while baby formula factories are closing. Yakutia, Tuva, Altai. These regions are not only fighting minus 56-degree cold right now, they are fighting Moscow's betrayal. General Winter has protected Russia from invaders throughout history. He stopped Napoleon. He stopped Hitler. But today, General Winter has become the Kremlin's greatest enemy. Because this cold freezes not only the ground, but also the regime's legitimacy. As Russia enters 2026, it stands at a sharp crossroads. Either continue financing the war and condemn its people to hunger and cold, or it will abandon its imperial dreams and try to keep its citizens alive. But Putin's choice is clear. Tanks first, people later. This winter may be weathered somehow with generators, wood stoves, neighbor solidarity. But it won't just be the snow that melts. That unwavering loyalty to Putin has already begun to crack like Siberia's frozen pipes are a sign that something big is happening. What do you think? Will the Russian people forgive this icy betrayal? Is it just the cities that are freezing, or is there more to Russia's future? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're curious about how things are really unfolding, not just on the front lines, but in the chilly villages of Siberia, stay warm out there.